One countdown turned into a theory. That theory turned into a missing episode. And that missing episode turned into one uncomfortable truth. Stranger Things may have never actually ended. This is the full Conformity Gate story. Stranger Things is getting a surprise final episode. An episode 9. A reveal that rewrites everything we thought the finale meant.
What?
And the name attached to this theory is Conformity Gate. It's been blowing up on Twitter and TikTok, especially among fans who weren't satisfied with how the series ended. The core idea is simple but wild. What if the finale wasn't real? What if we, the audience, were still under Vecna's control? According to this theory, the final episode is full of subtle signs that reality is off, that the characters aren't free, that the story didn't truly end. Instead, everyone conforms to roles they were always fighting against. Mike and Nancy end up becoming versions of their parents, even though that was something they openly resisted throughout the series. Their arcs don't feel rebellious anymore. They feel settled, almost programmed. And once fans noticed that, they started digging. That's when Conformity Gate really took off. People went frame by frame through the finale and started pointing out details that feel unsettling when you line them up. Extras in the audience holding the exact same Vecna-like pose. Background characters staring directly into the camera. A blank poster that feels unfinished. A radio broadcast that runs longer than it logically should. On their own, these things could be nothing. Production quirks, editing mistakes, coincidences. But together, fans argue they paint a bigger picture. One where the finale is intentionally wrong. One where the story hasn't actually broken free from Vecna's influence yet. And that's where the leap happens. The belief that Netflix is hiding a final episode. A true ending. One that reveals the characters were still trapped and that everything we saw was part of Vecna's last illusion. It's a compelling idea. It explains why the ending felt off to some people. Why certain arcs felt too neat. Why the tone felt strangely hollow instead of victorious. But before going any further, the other side of the theory matters just as much. Because wanting something to be true doesn't mean it actually is. The reason Conformity Gate won't die is because fans aren't just saying the ending felt weird. They're pointing to details. And once you notice them, it's hard to unsee them. People started rewatching the finale frame by frame, calling out moments that feel off. Not emotionally off, visually and logically off. It doesn't feel natural. It feels staged. Then there's the background behavior. People staring directly into the lens. Characters who don't react when they should. Moments that feel like they're breaking the fourth wall without actually doing it. Almost like the world is aware it's being watched. Fans also point out strange continuity issues. At one point, Steve Harrington, now coaching baseball, looks directly at Derek and then calls him Thomas. That isn't a typo in dialogue. That's either a mistake that slipped through every layer of production or something intentional. Then there's Mike. Fans noticed Mike Wheeler suddenly has hair that looks suspiciously like Vecna's. Same length, same shape. On its own, that's meaningless. But within this theory, it feels symbolic. Like Vecna's influence hasn't disappeared. It's blended in. Conformity Gate believers argue none of this is accidental. Stranger Things has always been deliberate. Too deliberate to make this many mistakes in its final episode. So, to them, the only explanation is that the finale itself is part of Vecna's illusion. In the final end credits shot of Stranger Things, the dice isn't random. It's literally sitting on a 7. That isn't symbolism people invented later. It's right there in the frame, clear as day. And once fans clocked that, everything else suddenly snapped into place. Because the ongoing puzzled event ends in 5 days. 5 days from now lands on January 7th. And suddenly the dice, the date, and the countdown are all saying the same thing. 7. This is where people start asking the uncomfortable question. Why end the entire series with a game visual if it's not our turn to play? Stranger Things began with kids rolling dice in a basement. It taught us that the game wasn't just a hobby. It was how the characters understood reality. Monsters, rules, turns, consequences. The show trained its audience to think that way too. So ending the credits on a die locked on 7 doesn't feel like a cute callback. It feels like a marker, a pause. Like the game hasn't finished its final turn yet. When fans went back and compared the very first D&D scene to the final D&D scene in Stranger Things, something subtle but unsettling stood out. The door handle switches sides. In the original D&D scene, the doorknob is clearly on the left side of the door. In the final D&D scene, the knob is on the right side. That alone could be brushed off as a set change until you remember what the show has always called our world, the right side up. Now here's where the theory locks in. When Mike closes the door in the final scene, the handle is on the right. Symbolically, that should mean we're back in the normal world. The danger is gone. The story is complete. But then fans did something clever. They flipped the image of the staircase shot. And when you flip it, the orientation lines up perfectly with the upside-down logic. The kids are effectively upside down relative to the space. The framing suddenly matches the earlier D&D scene, except inverted. meaning what looks like the right side up might actually still be flipped. During the finale of Stranger Things, the WSQK radio broadcast keeps playing longer than it logically should. It lingers, and according to a lot of fans wearing headphones, there's something buried in the audio. A voice, very faint, very distorted, but people swear they can hear it say, "Mike, Mike, wake up." The one who explains reality through narrative when things don't make sense. So the idea that he might be the one being spoken to directly matters. If the conformity gate theory is right, then this isn't background noise. It's a trigger. Vecna doesn't just control bodies. He controls perception, dreams, comas, altered states, and telling someone to wake up implies the exact opposite, that they're still asleep, still trapped, still inside something artificial. And it lines up uncomfortably well with the ending. Mike's final act isn't fighting. It isn't saving anyone. It's telling a story. Then there's the Hopper scene that people can't stop talking about. Near the end of the finale, there's a moment set 18 months later. Hopper is talking to Mike about sacrifice, about loss, about the way people punish themselves after everything they've been through. And then something strange happens. Mid-conversation, Hopper looks directly at the camera. Not past it, not near it, straight into it. He says, "You push people away and you suffer because that's what you think you deserve." Then, after the sentence is finished, he looks back at Mike and continues the scene like nothing happened. That detail is what set people off. Because Stranger Things almost never breaks eyeline like that by accident. Characters don't look directly into the lens unless the show wants you to feel seen, or addressed, or implicated. At first, some fans brushed it off as a coincidence, a framing issue, an acting choice that meant nothing. But the more people replayed it, the harder that explanation became to accept. The timing is too clean. Hopper doesn't glance during a pause or a reaction shot. He locks eyes with the camera exactly during the line about pushing people away and suffering because you think you deserve it. A line that doesn't just apply to Mike. It applies to almost every major character, and arguably to the audience watching too. That's where the suspicion grows. During the graduation photos at Hopper's house, fans spotted a book sitting in the background, Mr. What's-It. Then later, that same book shows up again when Max, Dustin, Lucas, and Mike are playing D&D. Same title, same placement style, two completely different moments. And here's the question nobody can get past. Why would that book be there at all? Mr. What's-It isn't just some random fantasy name. In Stranger Things circles, it's long been associated with Vecna-adjacent mythology, shape-shifting entities, false guides, creatures that manipulate perception rather than attack head-on. Characters that don't just hurt you, they mislead you. That matters. Because the finale isn't about brute force. It's about calm, comfort, everyone settling down, everyone accepting the version of reality they're given. So why keep a book tied to deception, illusion, and manipulation visible in scenes that are supposed to represent closure? What's keeping this theory alive isn't just the clues. It's the refusal to move on. Even days after the finale, fans on X and TikTok are still posting threads, videos, and side-by-side comparisons. Not just reactions, full breakdowns, frame analysis, audio isolation, reverse image tests. People aren't joking about this anymore. They're investigating it. And that's the key difference. If this were just coping, it would have burned out fast. But instead, Conformity Gate keeps growing. Every time someone says you're reaching, someone else posts another clip, another pattern, another angle that hasn't been debunked. That doesn't happen when a fandom is done. It happens when something feels unresolved. What's interesting is how divided the reactions are. Half the audience thinks it's unhealthy. The other half thinks ignoring the clues is exactly what Vecna would want. And that split mirrors the show itself. Believers versus skeptics. People who feel something's wrong versus people ready to accept the surface-level ending. And Netflix staying silent isn't helping. No clarification. No, this is just a fun Easter egg. No shutdown. Just quiet. Which, intentional or not, is pouring gasoline on the fire. At this point, Conformity Gate isn't just a theory. It's a shared experience. A collective feeling that Stranger Things didn't end cleanly and that the audience was meant to notice that discomfort instead of brushing it aside. Whether a secret episode exists or not almost becomes secondary. Because the real takeaway is this. Fans aren't reaching because they're desperate. They're reaching because the show trained them to. And until something officially closes that door, people on X and TikTok are going to keep asking the same question over and over again. Did the game actually end? Or did we just stop rolling the dice?
It's in the slash sign, 1/7. January 7th. January 7th is 7 days after the finale dropped. 7 days is about the time that Will went missing in season 1. The true finale will most likely drop, will probably drop on January 7th. Because 1/7 can't really mean much else when relating to time besides, unless it's flipped and it's July 1st, but I would really doubt that. I feel like the hype would have died down too much by then and that they're gonna shoot for a week after. Especially because of the detail of Will going missing for a week in season 1 and Joyce being told she was crazy.
There's a difference between intentional ambiguity and overinterpretation. This theory hit as hard as it did because the finale left people uneasy. Not devastated, not shocked, uneasy, like something didn't fully resolve. And when a story this carefully built ends that way, fans start searching for meaning. Vecna has always been about control, about shaping perception, about making people believe what he wants them to believe. So the idea that the final episode itself could be another layer of manipulation feels on brand. It fits the villain, it fits the themes, it fits the show's obsession with illusions, false realities, and corrupted memories. And there's another layer. The characters do conform at the end. They settle, they accept, they step into roles they once pushed against. Mike and Nancy drift closer to their parents' lives. Hawkins doesn't explode into chaos. It quiets down, almost too neatly. For fans who expected devastation, sacrifice, or a final twist, that calm felt wrong. So Conformity Gate gives them an answer. It says the calm isn't peace, it's control. It reframes dissatisfaction as intention. It turns loose ends into breadcrumbs. It gives meaning to discomfort. But there's a risk there. Because there's a difference between a theory that explains a story and a theory that exists because the story didn't land the way people hoped. And once a theory moves from this would be cool to this must be true, it stops being analysis and starts becoming expectation. Alright, before you roll your eyes and say this is just another reach, hear me out. This isn't about leaks, it's not insider info, and it's definitely not cope for a bad ending.
It's pretty difficult to put into words how disgusted I am, how depressed I am.
This is about patterns. Because the more you actually sit with the Stranger Things finale, the more it feels off, like the show ended but something didn't close. And when you combine the marketing, the puzzles, the dates, the visual inconsistencies, and the way Stranger Things has trained its audience to read between the lines for years, one idea starts to feel less crazy and more intentional. What if the finale we watched wasn't the end? What if episode 9 isn't just a bonus, but the real ending? Let's break it down. Stranger Things announced a documentary, a behind-the-scenes look at season 5, releasing January 12th. Sounds harmless, standard Netflix stuff, but then you look at the image they chose to promote it. Front and center is Will, not smiling, not emotional, but frozen in his Vecna pose. The exact pose he uses when he takes control back. And right above his hand is a director's board. That's not decoration. That board represents control. Who starts the scene, who ends it, who decides what's real. And in the corner of that board, barely noticeable, are the numbers 1/7. Here's where it gets unsettling. On that same board, it says take 3. But Noah Schnapp already confirmed in interviews that the finale scene was filmed once. One take, no alternates, no backups. They even said, that's it, don't touch it.
The volume finale, we have to perfect this. We'll be here all night, like, let's get comfortable. This is gonna be take 100. We do one take, and I run into the tent to watch it with Ross, and we both look at each other like, that's it, don't touch it, check, we're done. And it was.
So why label it like there are multiple takes? Because what we saw wasn't the final version, it was a version. And the way the board is labeled matters too. It's not written top down or left to right. It's structured bottom up, almost inverted, which fits perfectly with Conformity Gate's core idea. Everything in the finale is reversed, mirrored, upside down. So when you see 1/7 next to Will reclaiming control, it stops feeling like coincidence. If episode 9 is real, it's not a victory lap. It's not fan service. And it's definitely not a surprise bonus episode where everyone hugs and cries. Episode 9 would exist for one reason only, to reveal that the ending we watched wasn't reality. So what would the episode actually be? Here's the thing. Stranger Things has always followed one rule. The monster never truly dies when things feel too quiet. And the season 5 finale is too quiet. Episode 9 wouldn't open with chaos. It would open with discomfort, small things feeling wrong, characters repeating routines, Hawkins feeling stuck in place, like time stopped moving forward after graduation. The episode would slowly confirm what the audience has been feeling but not fully articulating.
I don't know about you guys, but I don't believe in coincidences.
Yeah, killed my cat! So it was thought. But Vecna lives!
The finale was a constructed reality, not a dream, not a simulation, a Vecna-controlled memory loop. Episode 9 would center on Mike. Not 11, not Will, Mike, because Mike is the storyteller, and storytellers are dangerous to creatures that survive on control. The episode would show Mike starting to notice inconsistencies piling up, conversations that don't line up, people responding before questions are finished, background characters repeating the same movements in different scenes. Basically, the world behaving like a stage set. And this is where Dungeons & Dragons comes back into play in a huge way. Episode 9 would frame the Upside Down and the finale itself as the last campaign, a campaign Vecna won. The idea wouldn't be that Vecna killed everyone. It's worse than that. He convinced them they'd already won, which is why the episode wouldn't be about fighting monsters. It would be about breaking belief. Mike, realizing that the ending he's living in follows Vecna's rules, not theirs. That people have conformed to their assigned roles. That no one questions the shape of their lives anymore. Episode 9 would slowly peel back the illusion, not with explosions, with truth. One character wakes up, then another, and once one person breaks free, the memory starts cracking. Because the real threat isn't Vecna's body anymore. It's his control over perception. And episode 9 wouldn't end with a final battle. It would end with the realization that the real ending hasn't happened yet, that the gate was never fully closed, that 11's sacrifice was incomplete, and that Hawkins isn't safe because the story stopped. It's unsafe because the story was paused. Episode 9 would slowly reveal that Vecna didn't trap them in a nightmare. He trapped them in closure, a world where everyone got something they wanted, just enough to stop asking questions. Steve gets purpose, Hopper gets stability, Nancy gets certainty, Mike gets a story that makes sense. That's the trap. Vecna learned that pain isn't his strongest weapon anymore. Acceptance is. This episode would focus on realization, not rebellion. Mike begins questioning why certain details don't align with what he remembers, not what Vecna remembers. Why choices feel assigned instead of earned. Why nobody talks about what they lost, only what comes next. Will isn't controlling anything here. He's reacting, because he feels the echo of something unfinished, the same way he did in earlier seasons, not fear, pressure, like a door that never fully closed. Episode 9's purpose is to show that the finale was not an illusion layered on top of reality. It was a compromised reality, a version of the world that functions only as long as no one pushes against it. The episode wouldn't end with a battle. It would end with the first real act of defiance since the war ended. Someone refuses the role they were given, and that single refusal is enough to crack the system. Not shatter it, not fix it, just enough to prove one thing. The story didn't end because it was complete. It ended because everyone agreed to stop questioning it. Here's the thing people keep missing. This wouldn't be Netflix taking a reckless gamble. It would be Netflix making a calculated one. Netflix doesn't need another hit. They already won that battle years ago. What they need now is cultural moments, not views, not charts, moments where the internet stops and argues. A secret episode 9 wouldn't just trend. It would hijack conversation across every platform at once. People rewatching the finale frame by frame. TikTok exploding with "wait, this wasn't the end." Twitter spiraling into threads, screenshots, contradictions. YouTube flooded with theories overnight. That's not marketing, that's participation. Netflix doesn't want you to watch passively anymore. They want you decoding, debating, revisiting, looping. A fake ending followed by a hidden real one is the most engagement-heavy move a streamer can make. And engagement is currency now. Why this isn't just a gimmick. This only works if the story supports it. And Stranger Things does. Stranger Things has always been about reality versus perception. Memory being unreliable. Stories shaping the world. Games predicting fate. The audience understanding things before the characters do. From season 1, the show taught viewers to look closer. Maps, dice rolls, music cues, color coding, parallels. You don't accidentally train an audience like that for almost a decade. You do it because one day you want to reward it. The audience is massive and cross-generational. Casual viewers and hardcore fans exist simultaneously, which is crucial. Some people won't notice, others will obsess. A show about altered reality, illusion, control, and games is allowed to mess with structure. It doesn't feel off-brand, it feels inevitable. Netflix loses nothing if people hate the idea. The original finale still exists. Casual viewers get closure. Hardcore fans get something extra. But if it works, they don't just end a show. They redefine how endings work on streaming. That's legacy level. People wouldn't say, "Remember Stranger Things." They'd say, "Remember when Netflix hid the real ending." That's the kind of move that turns a show into myth. This series survived years of hype, leaks, endless theorizing, massive expectations, and it still dominates conversation. A smaller show would fracture its audience doing this. Stranger Things would unify it through chaos, because whether people believe in episode 9 or not, everyone ends up doing the same thing, looking back, questioning details, rewatching scenes, which is exactly what the show has always wanted. In the final end credits shot of Stranger Things, the dice isn't random. It's literally sitting on a 7. That isn't symbolism people invented later. It's right there in the frame, clear as day, and once fans clock that, everything else suddenly snapped into place. Because the ongoing puzzled event ends in 5 days. 5 days from now lands on January 7th. And suddenly the dice, the date, and the countdown are all saying the same thing. 7. This is where people start asking the uncomfortable question. Why end the entire series with a game visual if it's not our turn to play? Stranger Things began with kids rolling dice in a basement. It taught us that the game wasn't just a hobby. It was how the characters understood reality. Monsters, rules, turns, consequences. The show trained its audience to think that way too. So ending the credits on a die locked on 7 doesn't feel like a cute callback. It feels like a marker, a pause. Like the game hasn't finished its final turn yet. One of the biggest red flags is the squawk radio station. They didn't just reference it, they used it. Characters, voices, bits that feel half in-universe and half meta. The hosts themselves aren't random either. Mindy Flair, Vance Goodman, those names aren't subtle. Mind Flayer, Vecna. That alone should make you pause. Now layer A Wrinkle in Time back into this. That story isn't about monsters destroying the world outright. It's about reality being warped so thoroughly that people stop resisting. They believe everything is perfect. They conform. That ties directly into the spiral symbol we see in the Upside Down. A symbol that's never explained. In Dungeons & Dragons lore, there's a god associated with chaos, manipulation, cold, and dark spirals. A god that doesn't conquer through force, but through distortion. At this point, the idea becomes clear. What if the finale isn't the end of the war, but the illusion that convinces the characters it's already over? I will 100% convince you Stranger Things is not over. The Duffer brothers have gone on record saying they didn't shoot multiple endings. No secret alternates, no backup finales.
You haven't shot multiple endings?
Oh, no.
On the surface, that should shut the conversation down. But here's the thing. Even if there aren't multiple endings, that doesn't automatically mean what we saw was the full truth. Most people walked away from the Stranger Things finale feeling a little off. Not angry, not shocked, just unsettled, like something didn't fully line up. So here's the premise. What if the finale we watched wasn't the real ending of the story, but a constructed one inside the narrative itself? Right away, there's a visual inconsistency that starts this whole spiral. The basement where the kids play D&D at the very beginning of the series. In one version, the doorknob is on one side. In another, it's on the opposite side. That's not a small continuity slip. That means the room is either mirrored or incorrectly replicated. And in a show obsessed with dimensions, reflections, and inverted worlds, that matters. Then comes the puzzle event. Stranger Things rolled out a puzzle experience where each episode unlocked a new piece. Recently, a new puzzle appeared. The word that ties it all together is graduation. And in the graduation image, there are exactly 12 people wearing sunglasses. 12. The same number of people Vecna took. That's where this stops being coincidence and starts asking a bigger question. If this isn't just a production mistake, then who is shaping what we're seeing? And more importantly, why does it feel like the finale is presenting a version of reality that doesn't quite add up? That's where the real theory begins. If the ending isn't fully real, then the next question is obvious. Who's responsible? There are two possibilities laid out right in the story. The first is Will. In the end credits, Will is explicitly labeled as an illusionist. That's not throwaway flavor. That's a role. And throughout the entire series, Will has been the character most directly tied to perception, sensing, and distortion. If anyone could still be influenced by the Mind Flayer, it's him, especially if the threat didn't die, but evolved. The second possibility is Mike. Earlier in the series, we're told a rule: X never marks the spot. This season quietly flips that and tells us M marks the spot. At the very end, we see the binders laid out in a specific configuration that literally spells it out. X is a lie. M marks the spot. That's not subtle. It suggests that Mike may be the one receiving or interpreting what we're seeing. Not lying intentionally, but processing something altered. A version of events filtered through a vision, a spell, or a manipulated memory. So the finale might not be fake in the sense of being meaningless. It might be fake in the sense that it's a projection, a constructed future, a reality shown to someone as a way to make them stop fighting. And that idea lines up with everything that comes next. This is where it stops living only inside the show and starts bleeding into the real world. Netflix didn't just drop the finale and walk away. They kept posting. Weird posts, cryptic posts, stuff that doesn't explain itself unless you're already looking for patterns. One of the biggest red flags is the squawk radio station. They didn't just reference it, they used it. Characters, voices, bits that feel half in-universe and half meta. The hosts themselves aren't random either. Mindy Flair, Vance Goodman, those names aren't subtle. Mind Flayer, Vecna. That alone should make you pause. Then there's the trailer they dropped with no context. At first glance, it looks harmless. Someone who kind of resembles Joyce. Nothing dramatic. But look closer. In the background, there's a Stranger Things poster. And throughout the entire trailer, reality is warping. People glitch. Time bends. Scenes feel stitched together instead of flowing naturally. That's the key. It doesn't feel like promotion. It feels like distortion. The trailer itself behaves like the world is unstable, like what we're seeing isn't locked in place. And that lines up perfectly with the idea that the finale isn't a clean ending, but a constructed one meant to feel safe, normal, finished. The question isn't whether Netflix would do something this strange. The question is why they would keep feeding the mystery if the story was truly over. And that leads directly into the symbolism they've been hiding in plain sight. This is where the theorizing gets deeper, but it's still pulled straight from what the show itself puts on screen. There's a game reference called Ghosts and Dragons. On its own, that sounds like background noise. But Stranger Things has always used games as symbolism. Season 2 did it with Dig Dug to explain the tunnels. This is the same language. Ghosts and Dragons ties directly to King Arthur. Arthur is a paladin, a chosen figure, a leader who doesn't fully understand the scale of what he's facing until it's too late, and that connection keeps stacking. When Mike is trying to figure out if Holly has been taken, we're shown 2 books, Arthur's Rule and A Wrinkle in Time. At the same time, the characters are watching The Sword and the Stone, a story about King Arthur battling a final wizard who transforms into a monster. One interpretation is that Vecna isn't the final boss at all. He's a stand-in, a wizard, not the dragon. The real threat is something older and larger, an ancient red dragon, a creature that can turn invisible, create illusions, and control minds with ease. That dragon leaves behind glowing red scales, scales that act as conduits for psychic power. Now layer A Wrinkle in Time back into this. That story isn't about monsters destroying the world outright. It's about reality being warped so thoroughly that people stop resisting. They believe everything is perfect. They conform. That ties directly into the spiral symbol we see in the Upside Down, a symbol that's never explained. In Dungeons & Dragons lore, there's a god associated with chaos, manipulation, cold, and dark spirals. A god that doesn't conquer through force, but through distortion. At this point, the idea becomes clear. What if the finale isn't the end of the war, but the illusion that convinces the characters it's already over? This is where everything starts to line up. The core idea is simple. Vecna isn't just attacking physically anymore. He's showing a future, a version of reality where people stop fighting because they think they've already won. In this theory, either Mike or Will is being shown a vision of the future, a future where everyone has conformed. They've accepted their roles, they're content, comfortable, no urgency, no rebellion. Look at what doesn't change in that future. One of the only consistent images we see is the painting of the red dragon. Everything else evolves. People move on. Lives settle. But that symbol stays exactly the same. That's where the parallels to the Truman Show come in. Truman lives in a manufactured reality without realizing it. Small inconsistencies start to appear. Ads bleed into conversations. People repeat behaviors. Things feel slightly off, but never obvious enough to cause panic. And just like Truman, the final emotional anchor is something red. In his case, it's the sweater tied to the person he loved. In Stranger Things, red keeps showing up everywhere. The final scripts were written in red. The playground merry-go-round is red, but it becomes distorted in Holly's memory with no explanation. The radio station knob shifts from blue to red. The show even tells us we're seeing events through the eyes of Vecna's next victim. In The Truman Show, the illusion cracks when Truman hears an evacuation announcement. In Stranger Things, we get something eerily similar. Reality feels staged. Commercials sneak in. Murray casually delivers an ad mid-scene, mirroring the exact moment Truman begins to wake up. The symbolism doesn't stop there. The sunsets, the framing, the emphasis on perfect endings. It all points to the same idea. This isn't closure, it's compliance. This is one of those details you don't notice until you're looking for it. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. Throughout the finale, whenever Mike is describing what everyone's future looks like, exit signs keep appearing in the background. Not once, not randomly, consistently. You see an exit sign during Will's scene. You see one at Enzo's with Joyce and Hopper. You see it again with Lucas and Max. An exit sign isn't subtle symbolism. It means one thing, a way out. This ties back to everything earlier. If this future is a vision, then the exit signs are breadcrumbs, subconscious tells, markers left behind by whoever is controlling the illusion. And if that's true, then the finale isn't telling us the story is over. It's quietly asking one question: who's actually out and who still hasn't found the door? If you've made it this far, this is where the theory gets unsettling. After the finale aired, a poster was released. Not before, after. And that timing matters. The theory tied to it is simple but eerie. If a character is looking directly at the audience, or has red eyes in the image, they're being controlled by the red dragon. During the finale of Stranger Things, The WSQK radio broadcast keeps playing longer than it logically should. It lingers, and according to a lot of fans wearing headphones, there's something buried in the audio. A voice, very faint, very distorted, but people swear they can hear it say, "Mike, Mike, wake up." Then there's the Hopper scene that people can't stop talking about. Near the end of the finale, there's a moment set 18 months later. Hopper is talking to Mike about sacrifice, about loss, about the way people punish themselves after everything they've been through. And then something strange happens. Mid-conversation, Hopper looks directly at the camera. Not past it, not near it, straight into it. He says, "You push people away and you suffer because that's what you think you deserve." Then, after the sentence is finished, he looks back at Mike and continues the scene like nothing happened. That detail is what set people off. Because Stranger Things almost never breaks eyeline like that by accident. Characters don't look directly into the lens unless the show wants you to feel seen, or addressed, or implicated. At first, some fans brushed it off as a coincidence, a framing issue, an acting choice that meant nothing. But the more people replayed it, the harder that explanation became to accept. The timing is too clean. Hopper doesn't glance during a pause or a reaction shot. He locks eyes with the camera exactly during the line about pushing people away and suffering because you think you deserve it. A line that doesn't just apply to Mike. It applies to almost every major character, and arguably to the audience watching too. Stranger Things has always trained its audience to look for patterns, games, and hidden rules. And in the finale, instead of answers, we're given more rules than ever, which leaves one uncomfortable possibility. The story didn't end because the characters won. It ended because they stopped questioning it. And in a show built on curiosity, that might be the biggest red flag of all. Vecna was never meant to stay dead. This part comes straight from Dungeons & Dragons, and it's important. Vecna, in D&D lore, isn't just a villain. He's a lich, a being who became undead to escape death itself. He was a sorcerer obsessed with power, so afraid of losing it that he abandoned his humanity entirely. And here's the key detail. Vecna never truly dies. In the lore, he's defeated over and over again, but something always remains. An eye, a hand, a relic, a book, some fragment that allows him to return later, usually by accident when someone tries to tap into forbidden magic. That's why Eddie's speech about cultists matters. Hooded figures, worshippers, people who believe Vecna is gone, until he isn't. The show mirrors this perfectly. We see hooded figures in Henry's flashbacks. We're told Vecna is defeated, but never shown his complete destruction. No finality, no confirmation, just absence. I think I found an actual countdown tied to Stranger Things episode 9. And here's the thing, Netflix doesn't do accidents like this. If this countdown means nothing, then the finale we got has to go down as one of the most disappointing endings in modern TV. But if it does mean something, then Stranger Things just pulled off the boldest marketing stunt we've ever seen. A secret website appeared out of nowhere called November6th, 1987.com. That date alone should already ring alarm bells. If you go to the site, there's a live countdown ticking towards something, and every few moments, the screen flashes a blue clock. Here's the part that matters. When you interact with the countdown, the animation kicks in, and the clock always starts at exactly 7 o'clock. 7, not random. 7 p.m., January 7th. The number that's been haunting the finale, the credits, the dice, the marketing, everything. And Netflix didn't stop there. Netflix Korea posted a clip that simply says, "It's time with zero context." That clip then popped up again during WWE programming, of all places, with audio that clearly sounds like someone saying, "Mike, wake up." That's not subtle. And wrestling isn't random either. Netflix now owns WWE. They control that broadcast. This is where the rumors really start stacking up. People noticed Netflix Netherlands changed their bio to say one last episode, but upside down. Other official accounts posted clocks frozen at 1/7. Even the letter counts in bios add up to 17. It's obsessive, and Netflix knows exactly what it's doing. Now here's the uncomfortable part. If there is no episode 9, then this finale has to go down as one of the most disappointing endings in modern TV. Just flat out unsatisfying. And that's why this trend even exists in the first place. Conformity Gate didn't come from nowhere. It came from viewers feeling like the writing broke its own rules. Character logic stopped making sense. Emotional beats felt hollow. Visual inconsistencies piled up. People didn't start hunting for secret endings because it was fun. They did it because the ending felt wrong. And Netflix knows that. Stranger Things is one of the only shows on the planet big enough to attempt something this risky. Dropping a fake ending, letting the internet spiral, turning confusion into marketing, turning disappointment into curiosity. No other show could survive that gamble. Either episode 9 is real, or Netflix accidentally trained its audience to believe the story wasn't finished. And if it's the second option, that's a failure bigger than any monster in the Upside Down. The clock is ticking, and January 7th is getting closer. Now add this. The finale credits play Heroes by David Bowie. On its own, that feels emotional, nostalgic, earned. But Stranger Things doesn't use that song casually, ever. Stranger Things has used Heroes exactly 3 times across the entire show, and every single time it played, the audience was being misled. The first time was Season 1, Episode 3. The song plays when the town believes Will is dead. We later find out that body wasn't real. It was a fake-out. The second time was Season 3, during Hopper's supposed sacrifice. Again, emotional monologue, big goodbye, cue Heroes. And again, it was a lie. Hopper didn't die. Now the third time, the Season 5 finale, the ending, the goodbye. The credits roll, same song, same placement, same emotional framing. That's not nostalgia, that's pattern recognition. Stranger Things has trained its audience to associate heroes with false endings, with deaths that didn't happen, with conclusions that aren't real. And this time, the show doesn't even give us the usual final season title card. No big, the end. No chapter stamp, just credits, and a 7 on the dice. If this were truly the final episode, why mirror 2 previous fake endings so precisely? Either this is the most careless reuse of symbolism the show has ever done, or it's intentional. And if it's intentional, then the finale we saw wasn't closure. It was misdirection, which brings us back to the countdown. Because if Stranger Things has a history of lying to us right before the truth drops, then January 7th suddenly doesn't sound crazy at all. Here's the part people keep getting wrong. They ask, why would Netflix ever do something this risky? The real question is, who can afford to? Netflix isn't experimenting with some random mid-tier show here. This isn't a limited series. This isn't a niche hit. This is Stranger Things, their crown jewel, the show that carried the platform through entire years, the one that broke viewing records, sold out merchandise, revived 80s music, and became bigger than Netflix itself. If any show can survive lying to its audience for a week, it's this one. And here's the thing, the reaction to the finale wasn't just mixed. It was loud, confused, defensive, divisive. People weren't just sad, they were arguing, rewatching, pausing frames, counting details. That's not what a satisfied audience does. That's what an audience does when something feels off. Netflix knows that. So instead of walking it back with interviews or explanations, they leaned into the chaos. Countdowns, clocks, upside-down text. It's time posts with no context. WWE crossovers, radio broadcasts, metadata weirdness. They didn't calm the fandom down. They poured gasoline on it. Because here's the marketing truth. Outrage dies fast. Confusion spreads. If there's no episode 9, then this finale will go down as one of the most disappointing endings in recent television history. That conversation doesn't help Netflix. That hurts rewatch value. That hurts legacy. But if there is another episode, even a short one, even a reveal, then suddenly everything flips. The weird writing becomes intentional. The anticlimax becomes setup. The backlash becomes the point. Stranger Things is one of the only shows big enough to pull that off without collapsing under the risk. Smaller shows would get canceled for trying this. Stranger Things gets headlines. So, when people say Netflix would never do this, what they really mean is most shows couldn't. This one can. And if they don't deliver something soon, then yeah, the finale stands as is. And that means all of this buildup, all these breadcrumbs, all this chaos was pointless. Which would honestly be worse than admitting there's more coming. That's why the countdown matters. That's why the silence matters. And that's why people aren't letting this go. If there is no episode 9, then the season 5 finale has to go down as one of the most disappointing endings in a long time. Not controversial, not misunderstood, just disappointing. Because this whole movement didn't come out of nowhere. Conformity Gate didn't start because fans were bored. It started because people finished the finale and immediately felt something was wrong. Characters acting strangely, choices that didn't line up, emotional beats that felt rushed or unearned, a final battle that didn't land, an epilogue that felt like it was checking boxes instead of closing arcs. That's the key point people keep ignoring. This theory wasn't born from hype. It was born from dissatisfaction. When writing is strong, fans don't invent alternate endings. They don't pause frames. They don't start decoding clocks and numbers and metadata. They sit with the ending and let it hit. That didn't happen here. Instead, people walked away asking basic questions. Why did this feel so small? Why did major character arcs resolve off screen or not at all? Why did the tone suddenly shift into something artificial and oddly cheerful? Why did it feel like we were watching a summary of an ending instead of an ending? That confusion is what fueled everything. So if there's no episode 9, then all of this marketing, all of these teases, all of these strange choices don't become clever. they become careless. And Netflix would be left with a finale that didn't satisfy casual viewers or diehard fans. That's the worst possible outcome, because now you've trained your audience to question reality, to look for lies, to expect twists, and if nothing comes, then you didn't outsmart them. You disappointed them twice, once with the writing, and again with the silence. That's why this theory refuses to die. Not because fans are delusional, but because the ending itself created the vacuum. And until Netflix fills it, people are going to keep asking the same question. Was that really the end? There's one more angle that explains why Netflix and the Duffer brothers might be letting all of this spiral the way it is. The spin-off. The Duffers have already said they're officially starting work on a Stranger Things spin-off on Monday. That matters more than people realize. Because if they know they're continuing this universe, then suddenly a lot of these unresolved, uncomfortable choices start to make sense. Maybe the finale wasn't meant to answer everything. Maybe it wasn't meant to feel clean. Maybe it was meant to feel incomplete. If the spin-off is designed to pick up emotional loose ends, psychological fallout, or lingering questions about what was real and what wasn't, then leaving the main show slightly fractured becomes intentional, not sloppy. Think about it. The biggest complaints aren't about spectacle. They're about meaning, what actually happened to certain characters emotionally. Why do some arcs feel artificially closed? Why does the epilogue feel like a performance instead of a lived-in future? Those are perfect entry points for a spin-off. The Duffers have also been very careful with their language in interviews. They haven't confirmed certain fates. They haven't shut doors. They keep repeating that some things are open to interpretation. That's not how creators talk when they're done with a story forever. That's how they talk when they know they're coming back, just not in the same format. So maybe episode 9 isn't a surprise drop. Maybe it's a narrative handoff. The finale gives closure on the surface, but the spin-off is where the uncomfortable questions get addressed. The stuff that didn't sit right, the consequences that didn't get explored, the psychological damage, the lingering control, the idea that things weren't fully resolved. If that's the plan, then the silence isn't accidental. It's strategic. And suddenly, all of this energy, all of this theorizing, all of this obsession doesn't look like fans reaching. It looks like fans doing exactly what the creators hope they'd do. Stay engaged, stay curious. Don't move on yet, because Stranger Things might be over in name only. No matter where you land on this, there's one thing that's hard to argue with. Conformity Gate has been fun. Not toxic, not delusional, fun in the purest Stranger Things way. This is the most alive the fandom has felt in years. People are pausing frames again, comparing scenes, arguing about symbolism, digging into marketing posts like they're D&D clues on a basement table. That's literally how this show started. Stranger Things was never meant to be consumed once and forgotten. It was built on mystery, patterns, misdirection, and kids trying to make sense of something bigger than them. Conformity Gate taps straight back into that DNA. And honestly, even if nothing drops, even if there's no episode 9, even if Netflix comes out and says, yeah, that was it, this still worked. Because for the first time in a long time, fans weren't just reacting. They were playing, connecting dots, challenging the story, treating the show like a puzzle again instead of a product. Stranger Things might be over, but the story doesn't feel finished. The ending left one relationship wide open, one question unanswered, and one character who never stopped believing. And the more you look at how Netflix and the Duffer brothers talk around it, the more intentional it feels. I think I figured out the Stranger Things spin-off, and it centers on Mike Wheeler and Eleven. Let me explain. Out of every relationship in Stranger Things, Mike and Eleven's is the one the show never fully closes. Everyone else gets some form of resolution, a future, a direction. Even when it's bittersweet, it feels defined. Mike and Eleven don't get that. And that doesn't feel accidental. Netflix recently posted something that immediately set fans off. And if you know how Netflix operates, you know they don't post things like that casually. They tease, they test reactions, they watch engagement. Now here's the key detail. The Duffer brothers still refuse to clearly say whether Eleven is dead or alive in interviews. They never lock it in. Instead, they repeat the same phrase over and over. It's up to interpretation. That's not how creators talk when a character is truly finished. That's how you leave a door open.
I guess the question was, is there an in-between for her? And that's what Mike lands on at the end. And his answer is yes, and that's what she chose. And whether the audience believes that or not is up to them, and we like leaving it up to them.
A Mike and Eleven spin-off works because it doesn't undo the ending. It builds around it. Eleven spent her entire life with her friends, but her friends only spent a small part of their lives with her. That line alone feels like a thesis statement for a follow-up story. A limited one-season series where Mike believes Eleven is still alive, searching for her long after everyone else has moved on, fits perfectly with who he is. It's emotional, it's grounded, and it doesn't require monsters every few minutes to work. And if the final reveal is that Eleven is alive somewhere far away, living quietly, hidden, choosing peace for the first time in her life, that doesn't ruin the ending. It finishes it. Here's the part people keep overlooking. The Duffer brothers have openly said they don't want to explain 11's ending because it would take away the power of it. On the surface, that sounds artistic, respectful, emotional. But then they add something important. They admit there is a definitive ending for 11's character, one that only they and Millie Bobby Brown know. That changes everything.
So Millie knows definitively too? Does she have a take on this?
Yeah. I mean, literally, we were texting with her 30 minutes ago. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
she's not going to tell you. She's not going to tell you either if you want to try to get
bother.
Yeah. Don't waste your time.
Does no one know? He's the best bet at this point, obviously.
Oh, that is Dan. I got to tell. No. Millie swore herself to secrecy.
If 11 were fully gone, there would be no reason to protect that information. Shows confirm character deaths after finales all the time. It doesn't weaken the story. It gives closure. Here, they're doing the opposite. They're preserving ambiguity while admitting a concrete answer exists. That's not closure. That's a narrative placeholder. They also say they don't want to change her ending, which implies they could, meaning her fate isn't a dead end. It's a branching path. And if Netflix has already confirmed a Stranger Things spin-off is coming, the logic is simple. A sequel centered on 11 only works if she's alive in some form. You can't build a future story around a character who is permanently gone without retconning the finale entirely. A Mike and 11 spin-off avoids that problem. You don't undo anything. You follow Mike, his belief, his refusal to accept the official story. The same instinct that has driven him since season 1. He believed Will was alive. He believed in 11 before anyone understood what she was. And in the finale, he's once again the only one questioning reality instead of accepting it. That matters. A story about Mike searching for 11 doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need constant spectacle. It works because it's personal. Grief, hope, obsession, love. The idea that everyone else has moved on, but he hasn't. And Netflix knows this kind of story works. A one-season limited series. Tight, emotional, character-driven, low risk, high payoff. It also solves another problem. The Duffer brothers clearly want to keep Stranger Things alive as a universe, but not by dragging the original group back into non-stop danger. A Mike and 11 story can exist after the chaos. In the quiet, Mike chasing rumors, old locations, whispers of strange events, people who think they saw a girl with powers somewhere far away. Meanwhile, the audience slowly realizes he might not be wrong. And if the final reveal is that 11 has been alive all along, hidden, choosing a life away from violence, that doesn't undo her sacrifice. It completes it. Let's be honest. Even people who liked the ending felt something was off. Not bad, not broken, just unfinished. The finale didn't land with finality. It landed with quiet uncertainty. Characters move forward, but the emotions don't fully resolve. The world feels calmer, yet not healed. And most importantly, 11's fate isn't shown. It's told through implication. That's unusual for Stranger Things. This show has always been visual. When something matters, they show it. When a character is gone, they confirm it. But here, they pull away. They let Mike narrate. They let the audience fill in the blanks. That works thematically, but it creates a problem. Mike isn't a neutral narrator. He's someone who desperately wants 11 to be alive. So when he tells the final story, the question isn't whether it's hopeful. It's whether it's true. That's why the ending feels unresolved. Like it's waiting for an answer it never gives. And unresolved endings don't usually mean a story is finished. They mean the last page hasn't been turned yet. This isn't just theory for theory's sake. The demand for a Mike and 11 continuation already exists. Scroll through comments, TikTok edits, threads, posts. A massive portion of the conversation after the finale wasn't about monsters or lore. It was about 11, where she is, what really happened, and why Mike's story feels unfinished. Netflix pays attention to that. They don't greenlight spin-offs based on nostalgia alone. They look at engagement, watch time, theories that refuse to die. Right now, the Mike and 11 thread has all of it. Fans aren't asking for another full season. They're asking for clarity, closure, one more story. And a limited spin-off following Mike searching for 11 gives them exactly that without reopening the entire universe. It also reaches a wider audience than people realize. This isn't just sci-fi, it's romance, loss, hope, a story that travels globally without needing massive visual effects. Netflix has already confirmed a spin-off is coming. The only real question is this: do you build something completely new, or do you follow the one emotional thread the finale very clearly refused to cut? Because that thread leads straight back to Mike and 11. This is where Conformity Gate ties directly into Mike, not just as a theory, but as a character. Conformity Gate exists because people notice something unsettling about the ending. Everyone else seems to fall neatly into place. Careers, relationships, futures. Almost like the story gently pushes them into roles they once resisted. Except Mike. He doesn't fully conform. While everyone else settles, Mike is distracted, withdrawn, focused on the past instead of the future. Even during celebratory moments, he feels out of sync. That's why these theories keep circling him. If the ending represents acceptance rather than truth, Mike might be the one character who hasn't accepted it yet. Not because he's stronger, but because he can't let go of 11. That's why he's the storyteller. That's why the D&D framing matters. That's why fans hear things like Mike wake up hidden in broadcasts. Intentional or not, the show places him as the one questioning the ending instead of living inside it. Conformity Gate isn't really about a secret episode. It's about whether the ending represents truth or compliance. And if a spin-off exists, Conformity Gate gives it the perfect starting point. Mike didn't wake up yet, and a story about him searching for 11 could be the moment he does. If this story exists, it shouldn't be Stranger Things Season 6. It should be smaller, slower, more reflective. Imagine Mike years later, Hawkins behind him, the Upside Down supposedly closed, everyone else trying to live normal lives, but Mike can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Not because of monsters, because the ending never sat with him. The story could explore memory versus reality, trauma, belief. What happens when the person who gave your life meaning disappears without certainty? Mike chasing fragments, old files, abandoned facilities, rumors of strange incidents far away. In parallel, 11's story unfolds quietly, not as a weapon, not as a savior, but as someone finally choosing peace, hiding, healing, learning who she is without being needed. That tension is the story. Mike searching, 11 hiding, both believing the other might be gone. And when they finally cross paths, it doesn't need another apocalypse. It can end with choice. Do they re-enter the world, or do they walk away together? That's a natural evolution for a show that started with kids on bikes and ended with unanswered questions. It lets the Duffer brothers keep their word that the main story is over, while still continuing the universe in a focused, meaningful way. No bloated cast, no constant escalation, just one emotional thread carried to its conclusion. It also protects the legacy of the finale. Nothing is retconned, everything is reframed, and most importantly, it gives 11 the ending she never truly got. Not as a sacrifice, not as a symbol, but as a person. If Stranger Things ends with 11 dead, her story is tragedy. If it ends with her alive and choosing peace, it becomes agency. Mike has always represented belief. 11 has always represented power. A final story about the two of them reconnecting brings the show back to its core idea. Love is something stronger than fear. That's why this idea won't die. Not because fans can't let go, but because the story itself never actually did. And if Netflix is smart, they already know it.